October last year, we're like, okay, you know what, fuck it, we'll just quit. We're both out January.
Paul Graham's assistant reached out. Do you want to come down to Palo Alto for an afternoon? YC gave us at its core, helping us avoid mistakes.
Let me get really good at programming so I can be the technical guy, lead some engineers.
What is up, everyone? I'm your host, Chris, and you're listening to Nonlinear, the podcast in which we uncover these strategies, hacks, and decisions high-achieving young professionals using 2023 to design careers they love. In this episode, I speak with Finn and Emil, the founders of Kapa.ai. What's so special about the two of them? They decided in October to quit their jobs. They started working on the project in January. And somewhere between May and August, they met Paul Graham in his villa in Palo Alto to discuss their product. Finn and I studied in our undergrad together, and then he got to know Emil during his finance master at LSE, and then they even did the CS master at Imperial in London. So anyone who's into either YC startups or nonlinear/tech careers, listen to this episode. It's freaking amazing. Let's dive right in. Hey, Emil, super nice to welcome you here at Nonlinear. Yeah. Same for you, Finn. Hey, you guys just came back from YC, like literally, I don't know, 4 weeks ago.
Yeah. I think we just wrapped up the summer batch here. Yeah, pretty much like mid-September, a month ago, as of recording.
With Kappa. And like, I've just now co-worked with you a couple of days. Like Finn and I obviously studied in our undergrad. Yeah. You two know each other from Imperial, which you'll hopefully like tell us in the next 40 minutes. And like just co-working with you has already been very inspiring, not only inspiring, but also from a utility perspective, like quite eye-opening. So like the mental models with which you operate and it's very little habit to put one example here out there. It's like, for instance, a release early, release often thing, which you guys are just like, for instance, telling me over and over again. And like, would you just like to take us on a journey through your YC experience, like whether you actually learned something or whether this is just something which you already did?
Yeah, that's a good question. Where to start? I think maybe to answer your question about the YC experience, I think it might make sense to add a little bit of like just historical context where YC came into play for us. So essentially, we both quit our jobs to start what became Kappa at the beginning of the year. So about 9 months ago or so. And just, we can talk about the origins and so on, but essentially after 4 or 5 months, I had the opportunity to go through YC with Kappa. And in terms of, I think, what YC gave us, I mean, there's so many ways to answer this, but I think at its core, it was just helping us avoid mistakes, right? Just like having a list of, hey, here are these like 100 ways you could essentially mess up at this stage, right? Before fundraising, as you're talking to customers, as you're working through deals, like there's so many ways to mess up. And just having someone who's seen, I think by now YC's had more than 4,000 companies go through, just having like a checklist of like, hey, here are reasonable things you should be doing, right? That was probably the most valuable thing we took away.
You should be doing or you shouldn't be doing?
I think a mix of both, but probably the things we shouldn't be doing are the most valuable.
Which is like, for instance?
I think what we would have done is like we were in March, like in April, we were thinking about doing it. And I didn't want to do it initially. So my plan was, okay, you know what, let's just raise money from a European fund. We have enough traction. And then I want to be the first team to have a lot of people behind this problem. And we would have probably, if we hadn't done YC, we would have raised like, I don't know, some amount of money, hired maybe 5 people immediately, had sort of a big team. That would have been a big mistake. Like in hindsight, it's great that we didn't do this. So what YC tells you is like, don't hire anyone unless you absolutely have to, because you just add clutter, you add overhead. You don't know what the product is supposed to be yet. And then having people is bad. It's not good. So that's one thing we, for example, avoided by doing YC. The concrete example.
Yeah, awesome. Hey, before we like go even deeper into all of this, let's maybe Emil, you already did this for a second. Let's step back and like listen to the two of you like explaining how you came up with Kappa.
Yeah.
And like how you, for instance, I know some bits and pieces here and there with like coming up with a list of like 10 ideas, cutting them down in 1 week, executing, I don't know, maybe from the beginning, the top 3 or something, seeing what sticks. Like how did you start at the beginning of this year?
So I think we started a little earlier. Like I think for the last 6 months before that, so like now a year and a half ago or so, Like we were like, okay, let's quit our jobs. We want to do something. That was always kind of what we wanted to do. But and I think you as well had at the time still the attitude, okay, I want something safe before I actually leave. Like, okay, I need to have the next thing ready. So it's like a smooth transition. And then we try for like 6 months, like on the side while you have a job. Okay, come up with something, some type of thing. I think in hindsight, that just doesn't work. Like you need the create some urgency and have like full time to make something happen. Like on the side, it just doesn't. And then I think in October last year, we're like, okay, you know what, fuck it. We'll just quit. We're both out basically 1st of January. We'll just start from nothing. And then let's see what happens. We'll give ourselves 9 months. I think that's what we said, of time to figure something out. Yeah. And that does work. Like once you quit and you have like nothing and you have to make it work, you can, I think.
Yeah, I mean, what's beautiful. What did you want to add, Emil?
No, I think there's definitely like that insight. I wish I had internalized earlier, because I think that would have changed how I'd spent the last 2-3 years. But I definitely walked around with this romantic idea. It's like, oh, you only quit, you have some like recurring revenue, you have some traction. Like again, you have the safe bet. But like,
Yeah. Like I wanted like a first customer, I think.
Yeah.
Like, okay, we have this thing built and like somebody bought it. Okay, now I can do it full time.
And like, I mean, of course, what gave you like lots of trust, of course, the trust in each other, right? Because you did CS at Imperial like in 2000, I don't know,
18.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm trying to remember what it was that gave. Like, I think we were just kind of fed up with it too. It's like it's never gonna work. I think it was like on a random call in like October. It's like, you know, fuck it, we'll just quit.
I think you initially flirted with a date like 1st of December. Like, what happens? What if we just quit the 1st of December? And then for like practical reasons and whatever, it ended up being like the 1st of January. But like, it was just that like, oh, this is actually really concrete. Let's just set a date, leave our jobs by this date. And then I think what happened was neither of us just kind of pulled out, essentially.
Neither of you pulled out, yeah, awesome. Although both of you were in kind of like very stable and very nice, not only stable, but also like cool jobs, I guess, yeah.
Yeah,
sure.
I mean, yeah.
Yeah, no.
Hey, and how did you then go about ideation? So let's just go back fully 10 months or something.
Yeah.
And yeah, you're sitting there. I guess you're probably flying to Germany at this time. Or maybe
we were mountain biking in Austria one time. I think there we were like at the beginning and then worked like for a week there. And then I think we did like a call a week or something like that. It just doesn't work.
Yeah.
Right. He works like 80 hours, I work whatever.
But how did you then like go about it? Okay, so you pulled the thing, you quit, you're out of the jobs, you're meeting up.
Yeah. We met just 15th of January. We just met. So you flew there for 2 weeks. And we we actually bought a whiteboard like the first morning.
Nice.
Just got into my apartment. And then we did basically for like 6 months, like until YC. So like he came first 2 weeks, slept on my couch. I then slept on his couch, and we did that like.
You slept on the floor, actually.
Yeah, sometimes. Yeah. So like 2 weeks. And we had I think we had one idea before we were evaluating, which
it's a pretty terrible idea.
Wasn't that awesome?
Yeah.
Some like developer productivity measurement thing. Well, like you get a lot of engineering managers excited to talk about it, but like.
And how did you then like? From what I understood, and please correct me, like from this tale which I have in my head, that you had on your whiteboard, you had like 10 ideas, then you cut it down to 3, and you were super pragmatic about it.
I don't think we had 10.
I think
it was
3
a little
or 4.
bit.
Yeah.
I think it was a little bit less structured than that. Like we have one friend that runs a computer vision company, and he pinged me like in January saying like, "Hey, how about you make something like what we're making now? Like that will be a good idea, just to have something like, hey." My developers get a lot of questions from our community, which they spend time answering. Can we not like automatically answer them? So I was like, I was a little bit skeptical. I was like, I don't know. It's going to hallucinate. Probably not going to be. But that's where the idea came from. That we had that. And then you convinced me to do it, basically.
Yeah.
For 2 weeks. And then we just made an MVP of it to try it out if it worked for like a couple of days. And then you just sold a pilot to Airbyte.
Oh, wow.
So we didn't actually we had like a POC kind of like hack together thing that wasn't like you couldn't really use.
Mm-hmm.
And then he just sold it to them for arguably not a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
It's like $250 a month, but like still, that was one a really nice moment.
Yeah.
Like I was on the plane and he had like a really late call because of time zone, right?
Mm.
And I got there, it's like, yes, I sold it. That was really nice.
Yeah.
And then we told him like, okay, you can have it on Monday. I think it was Tuesday.
Yeah.
And then we spent like 6 days basically cobbling together an MVP that worked and then deployed it on the Monday.
Mm-hmm. How big is Arbeit?
I think it's about 200 or so folks, but they had a really good use case, right? So essentially, I mean, they still do. They have this primarily like large open source free audience, right? So they have, tens of thousands of people trying to use their software. They're all in this big Slack community, right? Their team is super constrained, right? There's only so much they can actually do to answer questions coming in. So they just had this like really big burning like pain of, hey, can you help us scale support in any way possible, right? Like, we're willing to try almost like anything at this point to do so, which is, to be honest, that was just a lucky streak of like us getting in touch with the right people at the right time. But like that matchup was essentially why I think those folks were willing to kind of take a bit of a chance on, at the time, which was, in essence, nothing but like some paper mock-ups and some ideas and so on. But yeah, that's essentially it. And totally agree. I think that's still like one of the highlights, like just initially having like,
overall, that was
there's
awesome.
just like, oh my God, we've been trying to sell software for so long, like, on the side and so on. Like now we did it. It's like, also, holy shit, now we have 6 days to actually like deliver and build a production system.
But honestly, like the first time, like I've tried to do so many side hustles that never like amounted to anything. And then when you sell something for the first time, like that was fucking, it wasn't that, it's $250, not a lot, but that was awesome. That's really nice.
Because it clicks, right? If you can sell it once.
Yeah, you can probably sell it again.
Mm-hmm.
But then you do have to go, okay, I actually need to sell it like a couple more times to make sure this is like a systemic thing, not like one-off.
Yeah. But I mean, what was the time to sell? Like from idea to money, it sounds like it took like a week.
There's one thing which is like they agree to pay and then they actually pay. It'll take some time.
Yeah. What does Paul Graham say?
Birds fly,
fish swim, and
deals falls through.
That's happened a couple of times.
That's happened. Yeah.
Hey, okay, amazing. So I mean, we could now go into this story of the first sell. I think we already got the essence of it. Super amazing. Let's now jump forward a bit into the phase of you guys actually feeling momentum. Like I remember this one call which we had, Finn, I don't know when it was in March or April, and you called me, you were just coming off a call with a top fund, which we've basically like a couple of years ago, we were like, oh, they're so amazing. And now you were just like, yo bro, they're all ringing, like it's my phone is not stopping to buzz more or less.
That's one thing. Like that's another mistake we made in the beginning, which I didn't want to like admit. I was like, hey, it's like you're not supposed to talk to any VCs if you're not actually raising money. Like, don't do that. Like, because you do feel like as soon as you flip your LinkedIn to like get whatever, doing something new, working on a startup, like they all get automated messages. They start getting to your inbox and they want to talk to you.
Yeah.
This doesn't mean that they want to invest in you. They mainly just want to see what's going on. Like their job is to figure out like what's going on in the market and so on, and like what are new trends. So they want to talk to you and they want to talk to you now. Don't do that. It's just a distraction. You're not ready to pitch necessarily. Just like don't talk to VCs. And
even if it's just an informal coffee chat.
Yeah, it's not, right? Like they build themselves a picture of what you're doing, and you don't necessarily all talk to each other. Don't necessarily want that.
And it doesn't really get you anywhere, probably.
No.
Right?
But I think the only thing what you probably do when you do this for the first time is like you're like a little flattered. Someone sends you like a message, say, "Hey, very cool what you're doing. Like, you want to talk to? We invest whatever, right?" So you're a little flattered, but just don't do that.
Yeah,
it's just a waste of time.
Yeah. Hey, fast forward then from like April or something. I remember you guys actually being in Berlin for a weekend.
Yeah,
I think you were in Berlin just to check the city out and see whether it could be a place to be interesting to hang out at.
Yeah,
and then you had your final YC interviews actually. Right?
Yeah,
This day, this evening, you made it, and then there was the decision in the room for a second, like, do we actually do it or do we not gonna do it, right?
So I think that was what I talked about earlier. Like at that point, I was like, oh, we have too much traction for YC. I forget what it was, but we had like a couple thousand of them. I was like, oh, that's too much already. Let's just raise money and get people. And then like in hindsight, maybe that's lucky that happened. But like that week, GitHub announced something.
Copilot for Docs,
which is basically the same product that we were making. We were like, oh my God, GitHub's going to crush us, right? Like once this releases, we're dead. And that was also not true. Like, but when you do this, you feel like, okay, some big incumbent in the market that's going to like kill you, right?
Oh my God, they're owned by Microsoft. Microsoft's owns OpenAI. They have a tight relationship. Like they're just going to conquer whatever the space is, right? Like, oh, let's talk to the few people we know kind of in the space. Like, oh my God, this is an extinction level event, right? Like all of a sudden you convince yourselves like, wow, everything you built for the last 2-3 months is like, just, oh, you might as well throw out the window and pick up this other idea from the whiteboard we had bought, right?
But yeah, looking back, like for a lot of reasons, it's not actually like that doesn't like it's not necessarily a bad thing even. Like they actually never released anything that was half decent, but because of that, we were kind of worried. We're like, oh my God, like what if this kills us? Then it would be good to be in YC because like what better like place could you have to pivot if you had to than YC? That's I think ultimately why we did that. Well, like at least for me.
Yeah,
I think you were much more
super bullish in YC from the start. I think
but it was a great idea. It's like it was awesome.
Downside risk is limited. Right?
Yeah, it's awesome. And it's like I think now we're maybe jumping ahead, but it's like I think you're probably a little bit like me in this case, Chris. You've been drinking the YC Kool-Aid for so long, right? You've read all these PG essays. You've like done startup school. You've gone through this whole like rabbit hole, right? And then like, oh, now you get the chance to actually attend this stuff at your startup, and it's like. It's pretty much what you expect it to be. It's all like all this content, all this stuff. It's very genuine. It's very good.
Like, yeah, this would then be the next step to even go in there. Right? Like, just take us through the experience of buying the plane ticket, sitting in the plane, flying over, and then there's 1 or 2 highlights. I want you guys to tell us, but let's not get ahead of ourselves here.
Maybe for like what the actual like. Just to clear out what the actual format of it is. It's like 3 months in San Francisco. And then you're supposed to come there. You don't necessarily have to, but it's good. And then like a partner basically in the YC fund picks you to attend from all the interviews they do. And then they're sort of responsible for you. So you meet with them every 2 weeks. So you just work from your like accommodation in San Francisco. And then you have a meeting with them every 2 weeks, just like set goals for the next 2 weeks. And then you have one group meeting that's also every 2 weeks with like a smaller part of other companies and like they are partners all together. Sort of like to hold everyone accountable to their goals. But and then there's events usually on Tuesdays. There's like, there's food and then there's essentially very successful former YC founders come there and do a talk or you can chat to them.
It sounds a bit like a welcome week at uni or something.
What it actually is,
it's not that you're there like every day. It's more that you're at home and then you come in like 3 times a week.
It's 98% of the time just still sitting in front of your computer and working. And then with like some cool stuff sprinkled in between, that is actually kind of a bit of a forcing function for like having a goal and working towards it and so on. But I guess you were going to mention the intro, right?
But it's you're mainly working. And then you can get some advice if you want. And they help you set some goals. And then there's a bunch of resources you can use and you have to network and everything. There's events and so on. And then at the end, usually there's like a demo day at the end. And then before demo day, everybody starts to raise money. And then hopefully you close, or most people try to raise money. Not everyone.
Cool. Hey, and maybe also in like a 3 to 5 sentence explanation from the two of you what Kappa does. I will also cut it in the intro, but I think now is a good time to explain it before we go into the fundraising and everything discussion.
That would have been smart,
Sure. Happy to give the quick intro to what Kappa actually does. In essence, what we do is we help developer-facing companies make it super easy to deploy support and onboarding bots. So think of companies like Next.js, Airbyte, even OpenAI themselves. They will have deployed their own version of Kappa, which essentially knows about all all of their technical knowledge, their documentation, previous support replies, and then we expose sort of a very constrained large language model to their users that they can ask questions to, to help basically instantly unblock them whenever they have technical questions.
Yeah. Sort of like the one-liners, basically instead of having to read the documentation, you can just ask an interface like ChatGPT.
Yeah.
It's just a more natural way instead of looking through hundreds of pages of docs.
Yeah. Cool. Hey, and then at YST, so let's now. I think we all understood the context or the setup now, and how is it more or less happening, and like what's happening in those. So for instance, what's happening in those sessions which you then have 3 times a week is like one thing, and this was I think the very first question with which we started the session was like, you guys are dropping super valuable pieces, behavioral nuggets even, which for instance is like one of the set super ambitious goals for like 2 weeks, one metric, laser focus on this one thing, execute towards it, and then then iterate and then see where you're going, right? And like what more of those hacks are there? Maybe hacks, I don't know whether it's a hack or a strategy, and how is this in the setup, and how is this actually put into practice at YC? Like who sits in front of you and actually challenges you?
Yeah. I think we could probably tell some stories to make this concrete. For us, a lot of the time, the main challenger, so in these group office hours was a wonderful guy, Michael Siebel, one of the Twitch founders, who usually got on our back for focusing on the wrong things. The main point he was very good at, I think, making us think about is, hey, at the end of the day, this business works, only if you're able to scale Kappa up to serve large customers, right? Why are you thinking about X, Y, and Z when you could just be laser focused, on these specific customers? If you have some idea that Kappa needs to be able to work for a Stripe in 2-3 years, why don't you just go figure out how to sell to Stripe today? Why don't you go figure out exactly what this company needs today and then begin thinking about how you move your product in that direction? Because I think what very quickly happens when you try to build something is you also end up creating a lot of work for yourself. You very quickly create a job and you have all these things you can fill your day with that, feels like real work, but it's not actually moving you towards like the one thing that matters for your company, right? That's like a B2C startup. It might be, number of subscribers or viewers. If that's a B2B startup, like Kappa, chances are that's at the end of the day, revenue, right? So just like, at least for me, I'm sure you can, add on to this, Finn, but just having that like clear laser focus, at the end of the day, you're probably just solving for one thing. What can you do to move that one number?
I think for us, they adjusted a little bit what the goal was. So I think we came in, we were very focused on just like absolute revenue. And the first session, you set like your demo day goal. So you set yourself with your partner, you set a 4-month, essentially a 3-month goal you're supposed to work towards. And then I think my initial one was like, okay, let's try and set some like kind of outrageous, just pure revenue target. And then our partner was like, hey, like this doesn't actually matter to you. Like they pointed to us as like, so you're in the enterprise sales game. Like you have to make your market size is like, it has to be to like big enterprises for this to ever work real, right? So what's much more important for you is like average deal size compared to like just pure revenue. So we were just hammering out contracts like left and right for like not a lot of money. But you make revenue go up, right? But that is, to her, was like, hey, like you've demonstrated you can sell this, you can obviously pretty good at operating this, but like you need to prove that you can make really big contracts. And that became our demo day goal as well. It's like, okay. And then every week they hold you to it. Did you sign a 6-figure deal? Did you sign a 6-figure deal? Like that.
Nice.
That was the process for us more or less.
So basically in the QP equation, like quantity times price, you were saying, okay, let's not focus on the quantity, let's fully go on price.
Yeah. Because like we've proven that we can sell it. So that's out of the question now. But you've not proven that you can sell it for a lot. That was it for us.
Nice. Yeah. And then did the schedule or did it ever shift, and did they like challenge you in crazy, insightful ways? Or was it like, okay, basically we had the 2 weeks sparring once or twice now, and now we actually know what's happening?
I think maybe one interesting thing is like they've really like got this whole like 3-month timeline down to a science, right? Because every time you show up to these, now in this case, like the one-to-ones, right? Once you have your partner, that's very personalized. But with the group office hours, they kind of build up towards, raising around or towards demo day, because there's almost like a different discussion topic for each of these sessions. In the beginning, it's like, how do you actually frame the problem you're solving, right? How do you deem it's valuable? How do you get like a really nice 2-sentence description down for what you're building? Like next thing, and you come back 2 weeks later. It's like, what is actually the insight that you guys have had towards like building your company? The famed example they use, I think, is Airbnb, right? Like Brian Chesky and Joe Gebbia's insight early on was that, hey, to make Airbnb work, you need payments, right? Counterintuitive, you think you just need like a marketplace for listings, but it turns out it's really awkward if you have to like transact money. But if you implement payments as part of the platform, it becomes way more frictionless, and no one else had figured this out for a couple of years, and that's how they gained a lot of traction early on. So then you'll have a section about insight, and then it just kind of builds up, and you layer up like more and more until you kind of have these big discussion topics down, which is essentially what you kind of need to piece together when you go fundraise later down the line.
Do you want to add something to this?
I think to your question, like the overall quest we got basically remained the same. Just like, but like then obviously every week you have some sort of sub questions to that. It's like, okay, you're trying to, okay, I don't know, first week, okay, now we need to reach out to only companies with more than 1,000 employees, which we hadn't focused on before. So then you have some questions, like you just talk with your partner, okay, how do you do that? And then you have some calls, like, okay, how do you navigate enterprise sales? So like you have some sub questions, but the overall thing for us was, okay, it was the same.
Nice. Two follow-ups for this. Like maybe one quick one, because we could get lost in this, particularly for Emil. Like you've done all of the startup stuff before, startup school, YC stuff. I don't know about you, Finn.
I did not actually.
Yeah. So you've done all of the startup school stuff basically before now finally getting into the real startup world, like penetrating this bubble of like, I'm thinking of stuff, I'm doing online courses like after my job or on the weekends. Like, what's the difference between these startup school programs, or what's the different experience between doing the stuff online and basically on paper at home versus being there in real life? Like, is the startup school schedule actually spot on and you basically did the same exercises, or was it in some respect different? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I know what I think it's a good question. It's very different, because when you go through something like YC, it's often because you actually have a business or an idea you're working on. Whereas at least before, with all of these exercises, or like watching some, YC YouTube videos, it's all like hypothetical stuff, right? Which is cool. It's entertaining. You like begin hearing stories, and I'm sure all this stuff's helpful. But at the end of the day, like the only thing you care about with advice is, can this help me right now? Yeah, I think, does that answer your question?
Yeah, kind of. It's like I thought maybe like my hypothesis was that like the stickiness and the importance of the whatever they're saying is like you're 10x more sensitive than if you watch it online. Because we've all built side projects, and I've also like worked on a side project and watched the startup school. But what I've realized through mentors, like real life mentoring, is that like when a real life mentor told me one thing is very important, I take it like 10x as serious as like when listening to it in an online course.
It probably sinks in different if they tell you to your face, right?
Yeah.
Because it's the same people, but like, and the content I think is like, I didn't watch a ton of it before, but it's pretty consistent. So they do like talk like ad hoc talks all the time, and they sound like the YouTube videos.
Yeah.
But if you sit with them one-on-one and they tell you like, hey, this is gonna fuck you, you're like, oh shit. Right, you pay more attention to it then.
Yeah. Hey, okay, awesome, guys. No, actually, one more question. Like, how helpful was the community check-ins? Like at uni, for instance, or when we're now working like this every once in a while, when we're sometimes in similar cities, on the same city, a similar city, we kind of have this hacker house set up, right? Like some people work in different corners and different ideas, and this is like ultra helpful, at least to me. This is a total game changer. Like, how was this at YC?
Thing is, you don't do that there, really. Like, you meet people like at the events and so on, but you don't work together. Like, you work in your own house. That's actually interesting. But that's one thing they said they don't like, or Michael Siebel said that it doesn't like that. It's like co-working spaces. It's like you get too caught up with what other people are doing, and if you're just by yourself in your own house, you can create like your own like insane bubble. And I do buy this now. I think makes sense.
I just caught it.
So you're kicking me out now.
But if you said like, no.
Yeah, okay.
But it's cool that you have like all the people around you doing the exact same thing. So you have like some camaraderie basically, and I think for some other, depending on what business you're doing, you can also sell it to the others. I think that used to be a pretty big thing of YC. Is like, okay, you create something and there's 100 companies you could try and give it to.
Yeah.
For us, it didn't really make sense, but
for the cap table startups and stuff, it's like this.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, there's like Stripe, I think, is also the famous example with like the Collison installation where Patrick would go and like, you want to use Stripe? Cool. Just give me your computer and I'll install it for a second, right? But yeah, unfortunately, it didn't work super well for Kapa.
Yeah.
We did like one or two, but like they always done too small.
I like 5 requests a day. Hey, okay, guys. So you're like fully into YC. The program is running. What's happening there? What are some of the highlights?
We did get one email in the morning that was kind of interesting. Paul Graham's assistant reached out at some point, saying like, "Hey, Paul's in town, and he wants a quick chat. Do you want to come down to his backyard in Palo Alto for an afternoon and just have an office hour with him?" And I think by this point I had to explain to you partly who this man was.
That's hilarious. That's hilarious.
And I guess for context here, for your listeners too, founder of sort of YC, really I think the guy who wrote and produced a lot of the content and the thoughts and this whole idea of like making bets on like founders that are super, super early, traditionally much more early than, your average like seed fund would go in. So it was super cool. So got in a cab and then I rode down to Palo Alto and sat in his backyard for an afternoon and listened to him get super excited about what we were building and left there like with enthusiasm levels at sort of
fun.
Like, did he know what Kappa was about, or were you like, no?
No, I think what he does is like he's retired. He used to do this all the time, right? Like the early batches of YC, he was like your partner, and then I don't know when he retired, like a few years ago. Yeah. So now he comes like a few days every batch, gives like a talk, and then asks like the group partners who he should like talk to, and then they give him like a list of 5 or 6 or whatever, and you can come down to his house. That was cool. Yeah.
Nice.
But so he had no idea what we were doing.
What did you drink at his place?
He didn't offer us anything. I don't know. I didn't have anything.
Then, by the way, I think you can move a bit over with this camera.
Okay.
Right. Yeah. Okay, so he didn't offer you any drinks, no?
Maybe he did. I forget. I don't think I drank anything.
Did he have a cute dog or something?
I had some kids running around playing with toys.
So I was also wondering, okay, what's his house going to be like?
Yeah.
This guy has like infinite money, right? It's going to be a crazy house. It was just a nice, normal house. Like children's toys everywhere.
Yeah. Was there anything special about his thoughts? Like, we've read the essays. I've read Hackers and Painters, like the book. I've actually read it on your balcony once.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah.
Tried to get me to read it.
It's like, man, these articles are so amazing.
Yeah. I think like he's like known for being very enthusiastic. So like he doesn't know what you're doing, and he explains, and then he is like, okay, cool, and then he gets himself more and more into your idea and like starts reasoning about it and gets really excited. And by the end of it, he's like more excited than you are about it, and he's so good at like reasoning and like he's so convincing that you sit there like, yes. Amazing, right? So he explains to you thing why it's going to work. Yeah. And like there's some gaps in there and stuff like, right, which you should know, but you like gloss over it because he's so good at it. Yeah. And you leave, you're like very energized. It's like great. It's like it's very encouraging. You're like, yes, fuck, this is going to be massive. Yeah. We changed actually our pitch deck based on it. So he did like
He
calculated like the potential market for it, and it's like came out to be like $60 billion.
Was it like genius how he calculated it? Or
No, because I think we then went and did the math and then ran it by our group partner later that week, and she just caught like massive holes in the reasoning logic. Like all of a sudden the numbers didn't add up anymore. But it was still a step in the right direction.
But he's like insanely convincing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's like if he makes an argument of a startup why something like works or not, like you go like, yes, of course.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Reminds me a bit for anyone who read the Steve Jobs biography, like the reality distortion field, which people describe about him. Do you know it? Have you read it?
Yeah.
It could be, or sounds very similar.
Hey, he's like genuinely super nice guy.
Mm-hmm.
Really cool.
Yeah, it's like I mean, when you called me or you texted me that you spoke to him, like I ran around and like had to tell everyone. I couldn't stop. Like it sounded to me it was like the pinnacle of startup life, basically, right? Before we maybe like move on with the fundraising process of how this was, like anything else, I think you met Emmett Shear from Twitch also.
That was cool too.
Yeah. Very sharp.
Yeah,
he's very sharp.
I mean, you always tell the Twitch anecdote, like the what Twitch optimized for during. Did they actually go through YC?
Yes. So I think initially Justin TV went through YC, and then what happened was they realized, right, like Justin TV was essentially, how can you, like put a camera on a guy's face like Justin, who wants to be a celebrity and stream his life 24/7. And it turns out to do that, you have to build some really like hardcore live streaming infrastructure. And then I think they hit a point where they're like, actually, maybe this is the best business idea. Let's try to split this into like some different bets. And I think Emmett's bet was trying to figure this out for gaming, streaming. That became Twitch. I think Michael Siebel ran off and built what became Social Cam, which was more like a social way of walking around, kind of streaming. So they went initially through. I guess to answer your question.
Yeah.
What year was that?
I want to say 2011.
11.
11?
Yeah,
I think so. Yeah.
Right.
I mean, my flatmate is a Twitch streamer, so I have to be
on the lore.
Minimum amount of interested in Twitch.
Yeah.
And I really like it. Yeah. Let's dive into like I'd like to cover 2 more topics before we then maybe also go into a slow wrap up or also personal story side.
Yeah.
Let's go into fundraising though. Like what playbook did you follow? Or is there a playbook you followed? Like the sweet thing here again is like that Finn didn't have touch points with the startup space before, right?
Yeah.
Whereas you were kind of like, at least, I didn't know whether,
from a very outside end.
Yeah. So like you got the best practice basically downloaded in your head. And like what algo did you use to execute this then?
With YC is like for fun, like, okay, like there's so many intangible great things about it, like, but the very tangible one that it absolutely has is fundraising. So like I don't think there's an easier place in the world to raise a seed round than YC. Like and they do they just tell you how to do it. Like it's basically like 2 weeks before or like 3 weeks before demo day, open up your calendar. This is where you're going to fundraise. So as you're in YC, all the seed funds reach out to you. Like you get constantly like messages.
Assuming you launch.
Assuming you launch, right? So you need to obviously be public, and then you start getting people interested, like and investing in you or like talking to you. And then you don't talk to them. You schedule calls with them the last 2 weeks of YC. So you say like, hey, here's our calendar. You can book yourself a meeting. We will not talk to you before that. And they all try and make you talk to them before that.
And like, maybe this could also be like, we can also cut this out if this is too private or confidential now. Like when I was at Launch House in New York, like what they told us, the playbook they gave us was like tiering the investors, right? So you start with lower tier and then you kind of go upper tier, mix it a bit up.
A little bit like this, but also like don't
overthink it.
Don't overthink it too much, but like don't try and. I mean, for example, we only talk to funds where they had a good reputation. Like we didn't. There's so many bad ones, right? Like to these, you don't even want to talk.
Why? What's a bad reputation for a fund?
It's just like a lot of it is about how they interact with you, like just kind of bad practices. Like
they burn founders, they don't show up to meetings, they break term sheets in the worst of cases. And maybe that's a really interesting nugget. So
that's good.
Yeah, right. One of the tangible things you get out of YC is you get access to the investor database. Now, so one of the tangible benefits of being part of YC is you get access to the investor database. Now, what this essentially is, right? It's YC founder only forum where you're encouraged to rate and review all investors, right? Provide comments, all anonymously done, that you've interacted with or invested with. So think of it like almost like a Yelp for investors, right? Insanely helpful because it just aligns incentives all of a sudden. Instead of a first-time founder like Finn and I are, going up against like an experienced, seasoned negotiator, seed investor. Now you at least have some way of leveling the playing field, right? Since all these guys talk together, well, guess what? All the founders are also talking together.
And for example, I only scheduled calls with investors that had a good rating. Like everyone that had like bad rating, immediately no.
Oh wow.
And that's a bit of a privilege we do in YC because there's such a big flow of like essentially investor inbound you can be picky. But then what you do is like what you already alluded to is like you do some tiering, but the tiering we did was more in terms of like angels and seed funds. So we try to essentially line up some angels before we even talk to any of the funds, so that you already come with momentum into the investor discussions. So we essentially scheduled all investor calls in 1 week. In August, I think it was like 45 calls with 45 funds in 1 week. And then the week before, we just gathered angel investors. So just like some of our customers, some researchers we know, some like CEOs within the AI space that are like, we would like to have. So I think in total, we like gathered together like 10 or 10 angels,
something like that.
And then you come with that momentum into like the week of talking to funds, where also you want to go like the very YC friendly first and like the others a little bit later. But you go like, hey, we already have like what it was like 25% of the round that we're trying to raise already closed. And then that helps a lot.
I mean, okay, so let's then slowly go into the last part of the podcast. I mean, one of the parts why I also launched this series, which is called Nonlinear, is because I'm fascinated by the stories of people. Like, how do they get where they actually are, and like, what did they experience? How did they iterate their way towards the strategy? You two have such a nice culture and nice setting. Like, how did every single one of you become who you became, and how did you then find each other in this setup and decide to go for it? Yeah. And I mean, I studied with Finn in the undergrad, so let's maybe start with you.
Sure.
Because that's easy.
I mean, it is like, it's pretty fitting for your podcast, I think. Like, because we have the same undergrad.
Yeah.
We did the exact same thing for 3 years. We both studied business in Cologne. And then like, I didn't realize at the time why, but I found finance really interesting. Like in hindsight, okay, it was because, well, it's the most technical thing you can find within business, so that I gravitated towards. And then I did some banking internships, which I didn't enjoy at all. But I still found like finance kind of cool in terms of like academics. And then I went to LSE where I met Emil. So we did like the MSc in finance in London. That was like a cool experience. And there was some like
met each other at finance.
Yeah, we did finance. Yeah,
I had a very similar background to Finn before. Also business undergrad, like thinking, finance is going to be the shit. Like, let's go to London, try to go down the banking path.
Yeah, and then like I did enjoy kind of LSE. And there was one cool, like it was one course I liked. It was financial engineering. That's the first time I ever wrote any code. Very bad code, right? But this was like math and like some R programming, just like tiny bit. I was like, oh, this is awesome. I did like one project there and I liked that the most out of anything I'd done to that point. And I was really struggling because like at LSE, they push it very hard. But essentially like LSE is like you buy a ticket to go to investment banking in London. Like it's almost guaranteed. Like they will get you into like an investment bank. And like I didn't want to.
You had a hedge fund offer, right?
That came a little later, but like I didn't want to start for like I signed up for like a JP Morgan internship, like, and I hated that too. And
I mean, what did you say about the time at Goldman?
It's horrible. I mean, it's kind of interesting, but like,
But you once told me on your phone, like you just broke up with your girlfriend, and there was one particular phrase he said.
What did he say? I forget what did he say.
Working at Goldman is worse than breaking up with your girlfriend.
No, I don't think that's
100%.
That's a 21-year-old thing to say, but like, yeah, hilarious. No, that crushed me way harder than fucking Goldman. Goldman was just very stressful. Like they are like it's horrible culture. People are very mean to you. You're like 21. You're kind of shit at working, and the people are just mean to you.
I mean, story which we had with Yannis last week, which was super funny, is how they taught him sales at BlackRock. Right. So they had this one hot phone, and Yannis was super new at the company, and then they kind of like forced him to pick up the phone, and he had no clue what he was talking about. This was very similar.
I had a very similar thing. I think like I did like a sales and training internship for Goldman Sachs in Frankfurt. And then I was there 3 days. I had no clue what's going on, right? And then they forced you to pick up the phone for like customers. And then some customers like had some question. I forget what it was. And I was like, I don't know. And the whole floor, like grown ass men, right? Go like, there's like 30 people. I was like, what the fuck? It's like so unnecessary. Like they're just bullying you kind of like for no reason.
Yeah, whatever.
So I don't recommend doing investment banking. It's not great. And it's also boring.
Let's go back to the real route, and actually let's keep it in parallel. I really like this. Like, how was the finance journey for you then?
Yeah, I think it was also just a mistake from the beginning.
Why did you pick it?
Man, it's $1 million question.
He has no financial understanding. It's hilarious.
I don't find it exciting. It's a really good question. So I guess maybe some short background. I had kind of picked up coding a little bit in my undergrad. Not really because
I was very impressed by that.
Yeah. But only to build stuff. I find like building web apps and websites, this gets me so much like just personal joy, like the creative act of doing it. And coding was just like a vehicle. Again, writing some crappy code. But that kind of set me up to spend a summer in San Francisco, like after my undergrad, to like work for some tiny startup at the time. Yeah, initially as a business guy, but then I quickly like got friends with some engineers and like, hey, can I help out? And actually ended up spending the summer coding after my undergrad. And that was just like the most fun I've had. So at this point, I kind of dreaded already the fact that I had signed up for a finance degree in London, because I knew deep down I should just find a way to do more like building. And I think that's where I came in. We met pretty early on, and I think I was in this rosy glow, like, oh my God, you can build stuff on your computer. It's so cool.
Like the first interaction I had with him, I met him at like drinks at LSE. And then he was like, oh yeah, I made this like AI web app something. And I had not written any code at this stuff. I was so impressed. I was like, oh, this is the coolest. That's the only interesting thing I heard all day, basically. It was really cool. That was the first interaction I had with him.
That's interesting. You remember that? But
I do remember that very
jank as code now in hindsight again.
Yeah, I mean,
but
sure, it was cool.
What drink did you have?
Remember? It's gin tonic, bro.
Hey, okay, and then at some point, the two of you decide to go to Imperial.
Yeah. I was very stressed like the whole year, because like I didn't know what to do. Because like you're in this like finance bubble, and there's like a very limited amount of things that are like eligible. It's like you can do investment banking, you can do sales, you can do trading, you can do structuring, you can do try and work for the buy side. But it's like there's like 5 or 6 things you could go into. And none of them seemed appealing. Like I tried a bunch of them. And I still signed up for like a summer internship afterwards. But before that already, I think we both were like, okay, I found out I like coding. It's like, let's just sign up for computer science. And then there's like a degree you can do at Imperial where you can kind of sneak in and do a master's in computer science. Yeah, and I originally did it with the expectation of, hey, I do find finance very interesting. I like financial engineering. This is cool. But let me combine it with like computer science. So I want to do like quant trading. Like I had this idea in my head of like, okay, I'm going to be a trader, but I'm not going to do it by hand. I'm just going to write some code. Like that's what like high frequency or something like that. That's what I came in with. And then like gradually over time, like we did Imperial together. And I actually lined something like that up for like a hedge fund afterwards. But at that point, I was like, actually, like, no, I like this a lot. I got into this a lot. And I really want to do a company at some point. There's no point in me being like some opaque trader for like 2 years. just to then have like zero convertible skills to make a company. So let me just like try and get really good at programming. So like once we start something, I can be like the technical guy and also like lead some engineers. So that was my thought. And actually that's exactly what happened. So that worked out pretty well.
But I mean, credit where credit is due, because I remember that week where I think you had that offer. I mean, just to like almost bump you up a bit. It's like one of the like most awesome quant trading jobs you can get going in, is like, you know, some hybrid engineer, like investor. And I don't think at the time you had any of the other offers.
No, I did have some low where I talked to my mom on the phone. I was like, what the fuck am I doing? Yeah. Like instead of that, I took like a data science internship for Schlumberger.
I know. I told a friend about
this. It's like an oil and gas company. They had like some research facility in Cambridge where like was an intern. They did not do any good science.
Hey, you called me on a train. You were very sad during this time.
Yeah, I was trying to get a graduate job basically as a software engineer, and I hadn't figured out anything good yet. And it's hard to come off just like 1 year of computer science to like find a good engineering job, because like you're competing with all the undergrads that have like already a few internships in like 3 years. So I was struggling a bit. I did like 160, I think. No, I did 63 interviews.
I remember your Excel.
Yeah. And then in the end, like I got a bunch of jobs. Like I got Amazon, and then I joined Bloomberg in Frankfurt.
Man, but that's like insane, right? So you have this offer of a quant trading firm in London.
Top quant trading fund.
Which is like, I don't know, salary wise, out of the...
I have no idea how much it would have been. It was like 100, like, I forget.
Yeah, but still, like actually what you studied and what you're talented at, you have an offer. And this would have been the no-brainer path, right?
Yeah.
No-brainer path. But I didn't feel it, or like it must have been such a...
No, I think like I wouldn't have been, like I talked to the guy.
Yeah.
And he was like, hey, you want to come on? And then I was like, yeah, but I only want to do quant trade. Like I don't want to do any trading by hand. And he was like, yeah, let me see what I do with you. And I was like, I don't know. And like there, it's not like you do some really opaque stuff. You're gonna be a trader. You're not gonna be really good at writing any code. So like if you want to do a company, like good luck, right? Like you don't have no skills. So I turned that down. I was like,
yeah,
which was such the right decision. Like it's not, maybe not obvious, but it was definitely.
And how was it for Emil?
That's a good question.
This time,
I think between that time, sort of after LSE, I think that summer I was at Bain doing consulting, kind of getting my feet wet into that. Not necessarily having this idea that like, oh, I'm going to go down the engineering path, I'm going to go down this path. And yeah, that's an okay time. And around that time, I sort of had in my mind, okay, I'll go back to Copenhagen, where my girlfriend is, cool. And then discovered that McKinsey had like a slightly more techie side, which kind of fit well with what I wanted to do. So after Imperial, not wanting to go down like the full engineering path, I went back to Copenhagen to do that and was at McKinsey for 3 years before I quit. And we teamed up again. And it's very easy to be critical of McKinsey. Very easy. Like there's a lot of corporate nonsense.
I think every day.
you suffer from a lot of like damaged working practices that we have to kind of do. We kind of have to go through now. But for what it's worth, I also think it's a pretty good first job. Like you do learn some really valuable things you carry away.
You think it would have been better to be an engineer?
Now?
Yeah.
I think Kapa would look different if we were both sort of engineers. I think Kapa would be more of a product-led company than it would be what it is today.
Yeah, that's fair.
I mean, by your personality, it seems that you're so creative and so open thinking.
Very good designer for some reason.
Yeah.
But I can draw.
Like it's, whatever. You kept a good part of being yourself, I think. Hey, anyways, now wrapping it up, couple of finalizing questions. Like, obviously there were a couple of formative people, formative experience, formative choices. is there any category, for instance, like people, environments, or anything which you can already now pinpoint to, which was like decisive over the past 3 to 5 years for you? Like, for instance, what I'm thinking of, to give you a hint, is I'm thinking of this founding friend which you mentioned, who has the visual computer vision company.
Yeah.
Like, he's probably been quite formative for the two of you. Like, are there any other like formative environments, formative people, experiences, decisions, anything you would basically tell your past self to, man, take this serious, double down on this, or create this?
I mean, it's actually true, because like he studied with us, and then he did entrepreneurs first, and then did YC immediately. So he's like 3 years ahead of us. But I was like, okay, like, because he did YC, I know about YC. and he also wrote us a recommendation. So so we kind of doing the same thing he did. Yeah. But for
anything
me,
else? Yeah. Like, for instance, for Ariel in my podcast, it was like writing essays about consumer social, publishing those, and then kind of like increasing your luck surface area.
I think
any habits, any like...
Honestly, I think it can be boiled down to one thing, which was us finally having the guts to just quit and go for it.
Yeah, that's fair. Just quit. Like, if you go with your gut a little bit, and then just do it. And don't be so worried about like the job or whatever. That doesn't actually matter.
There's a zillion questions I could ask. I could ask you now, but I think that's a beautiful closing.
Yeah, let's close on that.
Nice.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
Yeah.
Then enjoy. And hey, is there anything Kappa needs, or what is Kappa doing in the future? Like, is there anything you want to shout out? Would you like a 6-figure contract from Kapa.ai? In that case, please reach out to Emil at Kapa.ai. Yeah. Thanks for listening to Nonlinear. If you like the content, subscribe to this podcast on Spotify, follow me on LinkedIn or Twitter. That's @IamKrishi3, 3 as the number, and Krishi with SCHI. Reach out on any of the platforms if you have comments, questions, or just want to chat.